anyone.
Good morning. My name is Taureen Howard Brown, TORENEHOWARD-BROWN. I was not named for anyone, but I do know that my mother said that there was a cartoon character named Corrine the Kangaroo that she got my name from.
Hello, my name is Romaine Woodson Wright, ROMAINE-WRIGHT-WOODSON. I was named after my mother, Romaine Coleman.
My name is Frank Charles Curry Jr. FRANKCHARLESCURRYJR. I was named after my father.
All right, so we have those. We have the Anderson family represented, we have the Coleman family represented, and the Carey family. You know, these families played major roles in the community, in the Guilford community, and in the church. So, as I was saying, I'm very emotional about this because I am a historian, and I believe that we need to keep our history alive. We need to share it with our children, our grandchildren, whoever. This community and this church is very important in the county and in the state of Maryland. You know, we're well known. You know, there's a lot of great people that came through this community and this church. Woodson, Kraft, you know, Carey, Coleman, Anderson, Mr. Flurry, you know, Miss Dorsey. I could go on forever and ever. Those names will be recorded on here. But I'm saying all that to say that we cannot let our history die, ever. You know, everything about this project, it's going to be published. So I thank you all again. I'm going to start with you with the second question, Taureen. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was actually born at the University of Maryland Hospital in Baltimore City, but I grew up in and around Howard County. I remember living in a house on 29, living in Main Street, living in Pumpkin Hill, but the majority of my childhood was spent on Mission Road, and we called it Lower Guilford when I was a child, in a little house across the street, or next to Miss Francis and across the street from Miss Mary. All through elementary school, I lived on Mission Road in Guilford.
Okay, when and how did your family come to Guilford?
I believe my great-grandmother, Viola Clark, moved to Maryland from Danville, Virginia. And she actually was living in Baltimore for some time, but around the time that my grandmother, Rose Clark, who became Rose Anderson, was about 14, they moved to the community, and they lived down the bottom, the street that Coleman Thomas and where Cartersville Lane meet, down the hill from the elementary school, in a little bungalow-style house in the early 40s, around 41, 42, I believe. And my grandmother lived in that location for the majority of her adult life.
Okay, next question is, where did your family settle in Guilford? And I think you pretty much answered that. And at any time, you know, if you all want to go off the cuff with these questions and talk about your ancestors, whatever, you know, feel free to. This is your time to tell your story.
Could you ask them once a question and ask us the same ones so that we'll all be answering them at the same time, maybe?
Say it again.
Like the questions you asked her, could you ask us so that it would give
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'm just excited.
Yeah, you know, I mean, since we kind of changed the format, but this works pretty well. If you want to ask a question, and then we can just.
Okay, that's perfect,
Yeah.
Susie.
Okay.
Okay, now Susie, where were you born and where did you grow up?
So I was born in Fort Meade, Maryland, because my father was in the service, and I was brought up in Guilford. I still live on the home place where my family lived. My grandfather purchased that land. His name was Jacob Coleman. he purchased the land that I'm living on now, and my cousin Deborah is living on. And when he was there, they say he had a apple orchard there, and he also used to sell little lilac bushes. So I've never moved out of the area. I've kind of just moved from one house to the other. So when my aunt died, I purchased her home. So I'm still living at 7356 Oakland Mills Road in Guilford.
Frank, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Savage, Maryland, by a midwife, Miss B. Harden, and my father was called off to the service in 42. We moved from there to Lock Brown Road, where my grandmother had a large parcel of land with the only family was living on. And during the time, our house in Savage burned down, so we built another house on Lock Brown Road, close to my grandmother, until my father came home in 44. That's where I resided as a young kid.
Where in Savage was the home?
The home in Savage was on Vollmerhausen Road. My father's father got ground. He worked for the Vollmerhausen, and they gave him a parcel of land, and that's where we built our first home.
And the home is still there, and then somebody lives on that property?
No, the house burnt down. We moved up here to Lock Brown Road, where it's now Snowden River thing. But when we sold the land at Snowden River, we moved back to the old home place where our house is at right now.
Okay.
And that was in 58.
Wow. So how did your family make a living in Guilford?
Honestly, my great-grandmother, Viola, and even my grandmother for a little bit, helped out in white people's homes. They were, they cleaned homes, they did laundry, they cared for the children of local doctors in the community. And unfortunately, I don't remember the names of the doctors that they worked for, but I do remember being with my grandmother, going to a home in Laurel off Main Street, and also Burger Road used to end with a home at the end of the property, like probably going to pick up a paycheck or something like that as a young girl. But one point I want to make is, as both Susie and Mr. Frank mentioned, military. Military was a big part of families in Guilford. There are a lot of men in the community who represented the United States Army. My grandfather was in World War II, and my uncle also, Ernest Boston, he was in the war, and these men sacrificed for their families and represented their countries and their country, the United States, in the United States Army.
If I may, if you do mention someone from your family, if you can give their names, so that way they can be part of the record as well.
You mentioned your uncle?
Ernest Boston was my grandmother's brother. I mentioned Viola Clark was my great-grandmother. She had two children, Rose and Ernest. And I also said that my grandfather, my grandmother's husband, Charles, was also in the Army. So most of my life, my grandparents weren't working, but I know my grandmother was also a hairstylist. and my grandfather would fix community members' cars for them. And I know that when he was a younger man, he worked in construction. But most of my life, they didn't have paying jobs.
Susie, how did your family make a living in Guilford?
Starting with my grandfather, Jacob Coleman, he worked at the quarry, the stone quarry. And like I said, he also sold bushes, and he also had an apple orchard. My father, Walter Coleman, he did construction working, and my mother, as Taurine said, she worked in other people's homes, cleaning other people's homes.
Frank?
Like in the beginning, I said, my father went to the service. My mother worked at Fort Meade for a period of time until he came home. And when he came home, he went to work at Fort Meade. And then after that, and mostly you worked on the farms back then and there. And in those days, it wasn't a whole lot of work in the Guilford area other than on the big farms. Everything around here was farmland. Some farmers was connected by 3 roads. That's how much acreage they had. But this is the way they made a living. Till the modern era, and then they start moving up different jobs and that.
Yeah, because my grandfather also, he worked for the state road because I'm told that's how he died. He got covered with the tar.
So what was it like to grow up in Guilford?
Best days of my life. I mean,
Yes.
as a child, when my mom worked, we would often be at my grandmother's house down the bottom, which I explained some time ago, and it was like a hub being in that part of Guilford, and we'd come every day, and we would play from sun up to sundown. We would we would be outside playing early in the morning, come in for some reason. It's not like I don't remember being called in for lunch, but knowing when to stop, go inside and play, and go inside, have lunch, like a bologna sandwich or Spam or something like that, and then go back out and play a little longer until my mother was finished with work. I mean, just Mother May I, and hide and go seek, and jumping rope, playing jacks. My grandmother was a pro at playing jacks and beating us in jacks every summer afternoon. Playing with nature, picking flowers, picking up bugs and putting them in jars, and watching the ants battle each other. Just finding things to do with nature, not really spending a lot of time inside when we were children.
Yeah, growing up in Guilford was just fantastic. The outside was really all we knew.
Yes.
Like, we had no time to stay inside. And the whole community was like a big old family. You know, you could go to anyone's home and all of the families took care of you. If you did something wrong, they were going to spank you and send you on home to get another spanking.
3 times.
They were just watching over you. We could play. Everyone just played together, and just like she said, the outside was just like, I don't know, a big playground. I mean, the woods. We had a lot of woods around. And the woods had little streams running in them. So you would take your little picnic lunch and go down in the woods, go to the stream, put your feet in the water, and sit down and have fun. Use the trees for, those were your swings, the tree horses. You get those little branches bouncing up and down. You get on the tree horses and bounce up and down. And in my family, we love to play baseball. So every day we will be in my uncle's backyard from sun up to sundown with that baseball and the group of us, and it became so that we made a little girls team, and so we would have like a team for Upper Guilford and Lower Guilford, and Upper Guilford would go down and play Lower Guilford, and I must say we were really good. And we loved to go to the back of the school because they had a big playground with swings and slides and seesaws and all that kind of stuff. So in our neighborhood, we just had so much fun. And when winter came, if you lived in Guilford, because the roads were made of stone, in the beginning, before they paved them all, you could forget it. You were not going to either get up the hill from your home, or you were not going to, because all of us were out there with the sled, and we made those roads so slippery that nobody could really get through. But we just had so much fun. Even in the winter, we stayed outside.
Frank?
Well, we was mostly isolated to our family place up on Lock Brown Road, because we had to walk from there downhill down to this section of Guilford to order to intermingle, and our parents didn't allow us to wander off that far. They made us stay right there and play amongst ourselves. Well, we had, I say, cousins, at least 15 of us. So we all intermingled and played amongst ourselves right there on the home place. And when we got older and started to school and stuff, they would allow us on Saturdays to come down to the other part of Guilford and for a few hours, and then we had to head back home to do whatever they wanted us to do. And in the meantime, we got to play with the boys that we used to call down in the bottom, which she preferred, because there wasn't no name of those streets then. And everybody would go down in the bottom, we'd get together and play a little softball and whatever and have fun like that. But you look up in the sky if the sun starts coming down a little bit, you better head.
Because it got really dark.
Really?
Yes, it did.
There were no lights or anything, so at nighttime it was really dark outside.
Can I ask a question? Because I hear the bottom. I know about the bottom. Where did that come from?
I don't
We
know.
grew
I
up
just felt
saying
like it was like the bottom of the hill.
Upper
and the-
Guilford, Lower Guilford. I just thought about it. Where did
Because-
that come from?
Because we used to come to church, and people would say, "Where are you going after?" We going to the bottom.
Right.
That's all we knew.
I know.
So they kept passing that word on, and that's how I know we knew about it.
Yeah.
If they asked where, she would say,
It's on Cartersville Road.
we lived down in the bottom, and everybody knew where you lived at.
Exactly.
And the thing about the bottom, where my grandmother's house was, right across the street from her was Mr. Ed Beck's house. Then there was Miss Jice's house.
Jice.
So that was Big Jerry,
Yeah.
Little Jerry's house, the Moores, Miss Abram. I mean, all of these homes were connected and just a stone throw, and that's just one curve of the bottom. Then the other side, you had Miss Bob, you had Shirley Small's house was over there. That just all these people, and because we're like different generations, but each generation had their brood of children that played
Within
together
the-
and
yeah,
whatnot.
within the
So-
generation.
So, like with Susie's generation, would have looked different from my generation, but pretty much we were still doing the same kinds of things, hanging out, going down the curve of the bottom, getting there's a pear tree, picking a pear and snacking on that. And I remember by Miss Jice's house, she had blackberries growing, so we'd go over and munch on blackberries and things. So you ate healthy because you were eating off the land at that time.
In the community, there were a lot of fruit trees. Because you had peach trees, you had apple trees, you had plum trees, you had, like you said, pear trees. Somewhere in the community, everybody had like a different kind of fruit trees. Or next to us used to live a man named Mr. Alan Mary. I think that's what's his name, if I can remember. He had apple trees, but he also had all these berry bushes that grew right next to our home, and he allowed us, a lot of us had gardens in the yard, and just like she said, we had pigs and chickens and things when we grew up in the yard too. Smokehouses and things like that were in our yard.
I remember I got a spanking because Miss Alcinda Bradley had a persimmon tree. And, you know, in Guilford, you made your own fun. And I was taking rocks and knocking the persimmons off the tree, not knowing that she made pies from those persimmons, and I got a spanking for that. I was like, but these things taste horrible. Persimmons are
Yeah, we had one of those in our yard
Oh my
too.
God.
Cherry trees. I mean, so you really, during the summertime and all that time, you really just ate fruit from
the
the trees. Because really, our families really couldn't afford to buy a lot of fruit
Yeah.
doing,
And we didn't have to because, like you just said, the trees were around.
Right.
yeah.
We also had those trees that had switches on them.
Oh.
Weeping willows. Which don't seem to grow any switches anymore. But when we were younger, if we got in trouble, we had to go get our own switch off the tree.
Didn't Miss Joyce have one of those trees?
Yeah, she
in
did.
her yard?
And so did
Is
Miss-
it still there?
I'm not sure, but Miss
Okay.
Bob had one also. That was the one we would.
And
Yeah,
my
our
grandfather's,
switch
and Jacob Coleman, like I said, he sold bushes, but in the old family home, he had a whole row of them. And my mother used them very well.
So we would get our whoopings for once we go pick our own switch. We have to rip those leaves off and then get a whooping for whatever. But sure, change your behavior, that's for sure. And
So what were your neighbors like in Guilford?
Family.
everybody knew everybody, and it was easy to just say go across the street, and because you didn't have traffic, go across the street and get some sugar from Miss Mary, or take these, go sit on the porch with Miss Frances and help her shuck peas, and you did that. It was just a sense of family, and not that we were related to everybody in Guilford, because we weren't, but you felt like you were. It was nothing to help other people out. I can remember my mother saying in that little teeny house that they lived in down the bottom, that as small as that house was, it was I think there were 3 bedrooms in the house, but there could be up to 11 people living in the house at one time, because people fell on hard times. You help people out, and that's just what people did. Help people out, help people get on their feet. I can remember on Sundays going to my grandmother's house for Sunday dinner. And then as we got older, of course, my mother always having a good Sunday dinner, but my grandmother making food for the guys in the community, and people would just stop by for a plate of food, and that was just such a great time to just be visiting with people in the community on weekends.
And there was always enough food for another person.
Yeah,
When they cooked, they always made sure that it was enough food, that if someone came to visit, there was food enough to get that person too.
I remember when I was young like that, we always was taught to help somebody out regardless. And if you go over there to do something for Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, you better not take nothing from them.
Yeah.
That is part of your charity work for this community. And I used to get so mad that sometimes they want to give you a piece of candy or something and you couldn't take it. It was hard and hurtful.
Or sometimes you kind of got upset, like if they had children in the family, but they didn't want to send their children to do something, and they asked you, and you had to do it. You had to do it. You had to go and do whatever the elders in the neighborhood asked you to do. You better do it. If it's safety, if it's safe, it didn't cause you any harm, you needed to do it.
And then you're gracious if they, I can remember my brother saying the woman wanted to give him a nickel after raking all the leaves in her yard, and he was upset about just getting a nickel for it, but my grandmother chastised him for, you should be lucky that she was willing to give you a nickel, because as an older woman you should be willing to help her out. And of course that changed his behavior because he grew up to be a man who would always help out other people. And that's the same thing. That's a part of who we are today, that
Yes.
somebody needs a hand, you just give a person a
Yeah,
hand.
that's like Miss Dora Carter.
Oh, Lord, you. I
When
was
you go
about
to when you go to work for her, she have you up there scrubbing them floors and all that stuff, and give you a bag of potato chips. I'm like, she has all this stuff in the store. She own a big old store, and she had me up here working all day and gonna give me a bag of potato chips.
Were they grease, salt, and vinegar, or barbecue, or just potato? What are we talking
Just
about?
regular potatoes.
You know, after about something, but. Right.
I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I'm not coming up here and work for her anymore. Next time she called, my mother said, get up that street.
So what was school like for you in Guilford, and where did you attend?
I went to Guilford Elementary School, and I started there in first grade. And what was so wonderful about my first day of first grade, my mother walked me down the hallway, walked into my classroom, and my teacher was Janet Neal, and my mom and Janet were classmates at Tubman. So when my mother walked into the classroom, I was like, oh my gosh, Janet. She's like, oh my gosh, Shirley. And so they're hugging each other and laughing with each other. And I can remember being 5.5 years old thinking, wow, my mom knows my first grade teacher. Then, wait, my mom knows my first grade teacher. Be as good as gold. And when I was in first grade, Susie was the teacher's assistant in my classroom.
Oh, wow.
Yes. When school was a little different for me than her, because when I grew up, I only went to school in elementary school. I only went with black students. So there were no white students in my class until I got to 6th grade. But school was great. We all got along. We did fun things at school. We had May Days, and we had to choose kings and queens, and we had great teachers. But one thing about school is when you went to school, you did not play around, because the teachers were allowed to beat you.
Oh my God.
And they had their little paddles. I know that my first day of school, I didn't really want to go. I kept crying, but my mother made me go. We only started first grade because at that time you had to pay to go to kindergarten, and my family couldn't pay for me to go to kindergarten. But my first day of school, I'm sitting in class, and the teacher said, do not talk, and evidently one of the students asked me a question. I answered her, and the next thing I know, I was up on her lap with that little paddle just going. And I think I never had another problem in school while I was in elementary school at all, because that was enough for me.
Which school was that?
I went to Guilford Elementary School right here.
Okay.
Up the street, right across from my home. I worked at Guilford School, right across from the street. Look, I'm still working some days at Guilford Elementary School, right across from my home.
Right.
For me, purely different from them altogether. I went from first grade, which school was down there at Mission Road. That was our elementary school.
Oh, you went to the
Miss Boone was my first grade teacher. Miss Lorraine Arthur was the principal. I went to segregated school my whole 12 years. We used to have to walk from Lock Brown Road right there to the hay scale to catch a bus. Every day, rain, sleet, snow, or blow, they bought you a black raincoat. We used to call them slickers, and boots. You had to be prepared. Unless you were sick, you had to go to school. I left Guilford Elementary and went to Alpharton for 1 year, and then went to Harriet Tubman for the 6th grade all the way till I graduated. When I graduated in '58 from Harriet Tubman High School, it took over 65 years for us to get a name Harriet Tubman put on this school. They told us, you got a school now, what else do you want? This is it, we're not giving you no name. So we finally, within the last, I think, few years, we got the word Harriet Tubman put up on that school up there in Simpsonville. But it was a trying time. I had Mr. Kraft as a principal at Harriet Tubman. And the first thing you learned when you went in there, if you didn't behave, he had a board about this long with holes drilled in it, call it Big Bertha. You and Big Bertha would have a session. And nobody wanted Big Bertha. So you did what you had to do. Some kids tried it, but they didn't like it after they got a taste of Big Bertha.
I also, okay.
But joyful, we made it through all of those hard times.
And also, I noticed, like, when we were in elementary school, we never had new books. Our books were always partly torn or came from another school that had already used them. We never had new books, but we learned.
By the time I came along at Guilford, it was a lot different. It was the elementary school was probably half and half, black and white, when I was in school from first grade to fifth grade. And a lot of the families of the community, our relatives, were throughout the building and whatnot, so it made it a safe and comfortable place to go to school. But in the community, one thing it seemed to be for my generation is while blacks and whites were together in the school, that's where we were together in the school. Our community, our neighborhoods were still pretty separate.
Yes.
So go ahead.
About the school, before the school on Mission Road, there was supposed to be a school that was, between Coleman Thomas, Cartersville Road.
That's Miss Minnie's house.
Mm.
That's Miss Minnie's house.
Miss Minnie's house, that was the school? Okay.
Was that became the public school? Because there was a public school in 1905 that started in Guilford, and I was always trying to figure out the exact location. I thought it was near this the current elementary school. So,
I know one year we did history from Guilford at Guilford Elementary, and I know that the house that the Abrams live in now was said to be one of the schoolhouses. It was that schoolhouse and the one that you went to right there on Mission Road.
Mission Road, yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I know, as I was sharing with Wayne, that when Willis Carter built, First Church, him and his wife also held school in that building.
Yeah, that's what they said.
That's what they said, that was before I was born.
Yeah, but I interviewed Virginia Kraft, and she had mentioned another school in that area between Cartersville and Coleman Thomas.
That's where
So,
Miss Minnie's house is.
Yeah. So, what childhood places in Guilford were most important to you?
For me, it was church. I mean, that was so much a part of our lives. Church and school, and probably my mom could say the same thing, and her mom before her, because that's what you did in the community. Church is so much a part of our lives. Now, and even then, pageants and like the Easter egg hunt at Easter time, and being a part of Sunday school every Sunday, not necessarily going to church service for us, but we were in Sunday school every Sunday morning, and a lot of our community activities were related to the church. So that was the biggest part of Guilford for us.
The same for us, church and school. Because we did everything at school, and on the weekends, church. We were at church all the time. And on Sundays, we were at church all day long. Church.
Well, on coming up on Saturdays, we had chores to come clean around the church, make sure the grounds was clean and everything. So when we cleared there on Sunday, which we started church on Sunday from 10 o'clock in the morning, and you got out about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And after that, a few years later, I don't know if you know him not, Mr. Hubert Mason, they used to call him Dub.
That's my uncle.
He helped to bring the Boy Scouts here. When we got a Boy Scout troop, I was one of the original members of the 513 Boy Scout troop that they started in the church. And we got to begin to travel to the parks and stuff, how to live and learn to how to survive and everything, to get our Boy Scout badges and stuff. And it was a whole group of us, mostly the church boys that was in the Boy Scout. And it was nice because we used to go all these different places and meet different folks and all that. But mostly on Sunday, you just give up your day because you was in church all day, whether you liked it or not.
Okay, what community activities did you participate in during your earlier years in Guilford?
Mr. Frank mentioned scouts, and my brother was a scout, but if my mom helped out with scout meetings, my sister and I were down in the house on Bomerhausen for a scout meeting. So while he was a Boy Scout, my sister and I were like tag-alongs at that time. Then we were Brownies, and then later Girl Scouts. When I was a Girl Scout, Miss Darnell's last name, Carter, would have been my den leader at the time. I can just remember not that there were too many of us, maybe about 5 or 6 of us, but coming together, doing crafts together, and cooking together, doing things to help earn those badges. So much so that I wanted scouting to be important for my family too. But scouts are big activities that we did.
And we also, we were in Brownies and Girl Scouts, and it was through Miss Spy, Pat's mother, Miss Thorne. She did a lot of those classes for us. Also, we did a lot of things at the church because we had Children's Day, and we had a lot of rallies, and at school we had like May Days and fairs and things like that we participated in the community.
Were you in the group that Miss Woodson started? Did she start a girls group or something? Our neighbor, Mrs. Woodson, had a group that she started for the girls in the neighborhood so that she could keep us out of trouble. And the goal that we had was to get to New York. And we did make it to New York, and we used to have a lot of little, we used to have those little dances to raise money and everything just for us to get to New York. And she took a group of girls around the neighborhood. I think they were from like all the families, because Leslie, Ann, your sisters went. You know, it was a lot of us. Nellie, she made a lot. Yeah, it was a group. We did have a little group there.
Well, I was much older then, and my mother was the founder of the Cub Scouts, and I was working, and I used to come home.
And your mom's name is for the record. What's your mom's name?
My mom's name is Marie Curry, and I used to come home on Saturdays in the afternoon after I got off from work to sit down to talk with my mom, and she would always have all these boys at it. That used to make me so mad I didn't know what to do. I said, "Mother, when can I ever have you back as my mother? Boy, I got to take care of these kids. They don't have no activities, no nothing. I have to see that they do this. And I want you to take off next week cause we gonna take trips down to the Lubine Caves and all these different places for the Cub Scouts, and I had to be her chauffeur. I says, oh Lord, I want to be with her by myself, but yet I have all these little kids. I got Overwatch and all this, but all in all, it paid off good because you learned a whole lot from it.
But your mother also had that baseball team
Yeah,
that she did.
she developed the first black baseball team in the community, and I worked along with her with that. We had a lot of fun, but we also had a lot of problems with some of the teams that we played. We played teams, Baltimore City, Hyde County, Baltimore County, Prince George County. It was called the Jackie Robinson League. And she was the first female manager of a black league here in Hyde County. She also made the Sports Hall of Fame in '60. And it's you have a picture at the rec center down here, a plaque of her she was awarded in 1960.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, but the boys still talk about her now in that
Yeah.
team. They still talk about that team.
Yeah, they won a couple championships.
They did?
Yep.
Wow.
And my dad, that made me think of on Sundays, the Columbia All-Stars. I don't know if you guys remember, they would play up in Dayton. The guys had a league that played, I don't know, I can remember at least for 10 years going up to the fields in Dayton on Sunday afternoons while they played baseball. And I also remember them traveling to other places in the area. I remember a trip to like Delaware or something like that for the guys playing baseball. And a lot of families were represented on the baseball team. There were Kellys. My dad was Luther Howard, but Kellys and Wilsons being on the team at that time. And at that time, I think the team was all black. Pretty sure it's an all black team. And that would have been in the 70s.
What stores were available in the Guilford area?
This store for
Store.
getting going up the hill and spending our pennies on penny candy. I have vivid memories of my penny going a long way with buying candy in that store. I remember as a child driving to Laurel to go to the grocery store, and then as Columbia started to develop, going to what would have been Long Reach had a Safeway at that shopping center. But that was from my childhood, I remember.
Susie?
Carter store was for my childhood too. It was a store where we could go get everything. We got our meats, our eggs. We didn't get our clothes and shoes from her store, although she did have clothes and shoes in her store. We usually went to Laurel to the Five and Dimes to get our shoes and clothes, and my mother went to Baltimore sometime. But most of everything that we needed came from the Carter store that was right up on the corner, from Miss Carter, her little strict store. You could not go in there without any shoes, and you could not go in there if you had on shorts. Girls could not wear shorts into her store. You had to have on a dress or a skirt. Men could not come in her store without a shirt. You had to have your shirt on. You had to be respectful. And sometime when you went to the store, like if you were buying candy from a store, if you wanted to buy more than she thought you should have, she would tell you, no, you're getting too much. No, you save it for the next time. I'm only giving you this amount. So she kind of would not let you get over the amount that she wanted you to have. But she had a lot of stuff in that store. A lot of good things later in life. She had a lot of good stuff in that store.
how she wouldn't be in the store and you would have to call her to come to the store.
Yes,
She'd be in the
and
house.
you have to go over there, Miss Dora, Miss Dora.
You have to tell a whole neighborhood, what you want, girlie? You have to tell a whole neighborhood what you're buying from the store. Frank?
Well, we used to go to, Main Street in Laurel for, they had a store down at Acme that we got most of our food and stuff. But as kids, we would come to Mr. Doyle. But we didn't like coming to Mr. Doyle because if you wanted, like Susie said, a bunch of this, a bunch of that, she said, no, Sonny, you gotta save some for the other kids.
Yeah.
You can't have but 2 or 3 of this, 2 or 3 of that. Pick a variety. And that used to make us mad because you get one flavor that you like, you want it a whole, well, you get a bag about that tall for about 5 cents. And that's what you wanted. She wouldn't give it to you. We used to come out there, that woman, she's so mean. But other than that, it was enjoyable, but it taught you that you had to share with everybody. You couldn't be greedy and take it all for yourself.
Exactly. Did you have any childhood heroes?
Can
I'm
I
sorry.
say one more thing? And one thing about her store is she used to keep these lists, like in the neighborhood, if you didn't have the money to pay right then, you know, she would let you pay on time, and then she would have these little lists with your names on it, and how much you owed her, and the next time you came, you had to pay that off before you got something else. So.
Did you have any childhood heroes in Guilford?
I'd have to say, for me, it was my teachers, having a vivid memory of my first grade classroom. So Janet Neal, who became Janet Carey when she got married, my first grade teacher made me want to be a teacher, and I'm a teacher today. And also the principal at the time, Octavia L. Carter, I remember how she would sign her report cards. She was like larger than life to me, and when I have the opportunity to see her at events or around the community now, she doesn't even realize how in awe I am of her. She is such a classy lady in the school building that, again, it made me want to do what I do today. And still does. Still does.
Let me see, heroes for me in the neighborhood, like